Boris Johnson was facing a Tory rift over the BBC last night after Downing Street sources raised doubts about the future of the corporation's TV channels and radio stations. A plan floated by government insiders yesterday proposed replacing the annual TV license fee which funds the national broadcaster with a Netflix-style subscription service. The blueprint also suggested the BBC should be forced to sell of the overwhelming majority of its 61 radio stations and scrap some of its 10 TV channels, but Tory backbenchers Damian Green and Hugh Merriman implored the Prime Minister not to launch an offensive against the corporation. Mr Green, a former cabinet minister who was effectively Theresa May's deputy in the last Parliament, claimed the proposal's threat. The MP for Ashford hoped that reports of the blueprint were kite flying, a Westminster term for floating a radical idea to gauge reaction rather than a serious policy commitment. Destroying the BBC wasn't in our manifesto and would be cultural vandalism, he said on Twitter. Questioning whether the idea would be popular, he added, vote Tory and close Radio 2. Really? Hugh Merriman, Tory MP for Bexhill and Battle, accused some figures in the government of having a vendetta against the corporation. I'm not sure this vendetta against the BBC is going to end well, he said, referring to the proposed shake-up. He added, no mention of it in our manifesto, where we actually promised to work with BBC to build new partnerships across the globe, so I won't be supporting it. The MPs hit out after a Sunday newspaper quoted a senior government source as threatening a massive pruning back of the BBC. We are not bluffing on the license fee. We are having a consultation and we will whack it. It has to be a subscription model, the newspaper quoted the source as saying. They've got hundreds of radio stations, they've got all these TV stations and a massive website. The whole thing's needs. They should have a few TV stations, a couple of radio stations and a massively curtailed online presence and put more money and effort into the World Service, which is part of its core job. A Number 10 source was quoted as saying, the PM is firmly of the view that there needs to be serious reform. He is really strident on this. Other proposals in the plan included scaling back the BBC's website and banning the corporation's stars from lucrative second jobs. The blueprint was said to recommend ditching the vast majority of BBC radio stations while safeguarding Radio 3 and Radio 4. A cabinet minister sought to play down reports of the plan yesterday. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps told Sky News' Sophie Ridge on Sunday show, I would be pretty cautious of some unattributed comments. There is a consultation out there. It is just a consultation at this stage. There are no further decisions made at all. The BBC is a much-loved national treasure. We all want it to be a huge success. But everybody, including the BBC themselves, recognizes that in a changing world the BBC itself will have to change. But it is simply not the case that there is some preordained decision about the future funding of the BBC out there. The charter runs to 2027, so there is long way to go on all these. A Downing Street spokeswoman yesterday claimed the reports were over the top, while pointing out that the government's only policy decision about the BBC since the general election was to hold a public consultation on a proposal to end criminal prosecutions for non-payment of the license fee. The spokeswoman said, "This is not formal policy. The government's only commitment at the moment is to hold a consultation on decriminalising the licence fee." Former Culture Secretary John Whittingdale was appointed Minister of State at his old department in last week's reshuffle to oversee government policy towards the broadcaster.